Week coal miner, and it was by the Courier Mail's great Pete Badel, dissecting the year for the Broncos, a number of key moments that went wrong along the way. So I thought I'd shoot him a text this morning, see if we can get him back on the show. Pete, welcome.
Hello, boys. Good to be back.
Hey, Pete, I read your article during the week. You probably listened to that audio just then. It's been quite the fortnight, probably quite the month for the Broncos, and you've been covering it all. Can you run us through the timeline of what's gone on and what's gone wrong for the Broncos this year?
Yeah, well, Mag, it's been quite the season, really. I mean, it's been a season of turbulence. I don't think at any stage they've found any continuity, the Broncos, and really if there is a horror show to emerge from this season for any club, I think it's been the Broncos. I think they've been the poster boys of decline. And it's a stunning decline. It's one we didn't envisage. I mean, last year they were grand finalists. They were 3 minutes away from their premiership. And I thought, guys, I thought they'd make the top four this season, and that would put them in a position to challenge for the competition. But injuries, suspensions, the state of origin grind, and then the desperate chase at the back end to stay in touch with the top eight all conspired to ultimately sink a proud club that is now in crisis and facing a review this week.
So you mentioned all those things just then, Pete. You know, they've had a pretty significant sort of injury toll. It's always tough for them during that origin period. Are they excuses, or are they good enough reasons to and I don't like using the word save, Kevy, but it feels like that's probably the right word now. But I mean, what do you put it down to outside of those things? Why has their season just been derailed so heavily? Is it more off-field than on-field?
Yeah, well, guys, look, I wouldn't say they're excuses at all. I mean, historically, you look at any team, any team that invariably wins a premiership has continuity of roster, and they kept their best players on the park. And I can't recall many teams winning a premiership when their halfback or their quarterback, the brains of the team, is sidelined for an extended period. And for me, guys, there were two big names for me this year, guys, that crystallised Brisbane's season and their free fall. One was the loss of Tom Flegler. We can't underestimate. He was the standover man for that club. And without him, it put a lot of pressure on Payne Haas to be the main man up front. And great props work in unison and work in tandem, sorry. And I think the second person was Adam Reynolds. I mean, when he tore his bicep and missed 3 months of the season, they just didn't have the commander to get them through that period of the origin grind when Adam Reynolds was there last year to keep them stable. And without him this year through that period, that's when the wheels started to fall off. And I thought, guys, their recruitment this year was shambolic. It wasn't good enough. They didn't replace and replenish well enough. And when you lose Herbie Farnworth and Kurt Capel on top of that, and Keenan Paliasea, 4 players from their grand final team last year, that was always going to ring alarm bells for me.
Have they? Will they dip into the recruitment market this year, Pete? Do they need to?
I think they need to, James. The problem is they haven't. I mean, they have at this point right now, they haven't signed anyone at all for next season, which is a real concern. I mean, I'm always an advocate for bringing some fresh blood into a club. I'm not saying you need wholesale changes or purchases, but often just 1 or 2 guys to just keep people on their toes, bring some fresh faces in. But right now, boys, they haven't signed anyone for next season, and they're going to have to put their faith in the current squad they've got. And right now, whether they've got the squad to challenge for the title next year, that's the $1 million question.
So the 2 losses that of players that you just mentioned, the 2 big ones, obviously Flegler and Farnworth, was that a misstep by the club? Could they have done more to keep them at Brisbane, or was it just a case of bigger money elsewhere couldn't really come to the party and match that offer, or did the club make an error there?
I think they made an error with Flegler. Look, I think it was always going to be hard to retain Herbie because he received a huge offer from the Dolphins, and to me, you can only have one pretty highly paid centre on your roster. You can't have 2, as Melbourne and Penrith have showed. But I think they could have certainly retained Flegler. I mean, I know he was on about 650,000 at the Broncos when he was coming off contract. I'm told the offer was slightly increased to around 700. The Dolphins offered 800 plus. I think if Brisbane upped the ante by another 100,000 a season and paid him 800, I think Flegler would have stayed. And I think that changes a lot of things for the Broncos. But look, guys, he ended up only playing 4 games this year for the Dolphins. So, maybe a sliding doors moment. If he stayed at the Bronx, maybe he never gets injured. We'll never know.
Pete, does Kevy make it to round 1 next year? And how has that Melbourne game impacted that?
I think he will, James, yes. I mean, I spoke to Dave Donaghy, the Broncos CEO, 2 days ago, and he was adamant that Kevin Walters would not be sacked. And so I believe he's there for round 1 next year. I don't think the Storm loss, guys, really is a huge barometer of whether Kevy stays. I mean, we already knew they couldn't make the finals. They had half their squad out. And look, guys, for me, I think making the grand final last year buys Kevy some grace. I think he deserves the chance to turn things around. But certainly, guys, if they're 1-6 after 7 rounds next year, the drums will be beating. So Brisbane need to get off to a flyer, and Kevy needs to get off to a flyer to just remove some of the turbulence and get some confidence back in the club.
The coaching staff's getting a shake-up next year, regardless of Kevy. So both assistant coaches gone. Do we know who they're bringing in to assist Kevy next year?
Yes, James. So Trent Barrett, the current Eels interim coach, he'll be one of the assistants. He'll oversee the attack for the Broncos, and they're also bringing in Ben Teo to be, I guess, the defence guy. Now, I think Ben Teo is an outstanding signing. He's a young coach on the rise. And one thing he's got, guys, is pedigree. He's won a premiership as a player. He was a State of Origin player, and he's young enough to still connect with the younger players in the game. And I think every young forward at the Broncos will have instant respect for him because as a player, there was no tougher hitter than Ben Teo. And I think he'll drive some of the harder standards that club needs. So I think Ben Teo will be critical to Kevin Walters' reformation next year.
Pete, I've seen Ben Teo's face in a coach's box, but I can't remember where it is. Who's he with at the moment? He's with the Finns. Right. Okay. So yes. he'll be the defensive sort of muscle. It sounds like. So you're giving Kevy at least 5, 6, maybe 7 weeks at the start of next year. Grace period. That feels like the consensus.
Well, look, guys, I hope he gets longer, really. I mean, look, I know Phil Rothfield, my esteemed colleague, he mentioned 12 weeks, but we saw with Brad Arthur this year and Jason Demetriou, they were both sacked within, I think, 10 rounds from memory. So, look, I guess it all depends on the start, guys. I mean, if they're 3-3, you'd probably say, okay, Brisbane need to get moving, Kevy's okay. But if they're 0-6, well, I can't see any coach surviving. But I'm pretty confident, guys, Brisbane can turn things around. But Adam Reynolds needs to stay fit. He's the elephant in the room next year. If he's 35 next year, if he stays fit, they make the finals. If he doesn't stay fit, I think they could miss out again.
Pete, we've got a bunch of questions coming through here on the text line for you. I'll just run through them. Is Kobe Black the kid to replace Reno? If not, is Sam Walker going to be in the number 7 jersey?
Great question. Look, my personal opinion, guys, they've got big raps on Kobe Black. They think he's a pretty handy player. He's done some good things this year in the lower tiers. So he's Queensland under-19s halfback. Ben Teo actually coached him this year for the Queensland under-19s. He's got a good kicking game, pretty solid head on his shoulders. So look, I think he's got some promise. But guys, my personal opinion, I would sign Sam Walker. I'd pay him $1.2 million plus. I think he's worth it.
He wants 1.5 though, Pete. He wants 1.5.
No, isn't that way he's getting 1.5?
Any truth to that?
Well, if that's the asking price, guys, he won't get it because no club can afford that. But look, he's an Ipswich boy. He's a Queensland kid. He belongs. He'd be a perfect fit for the Broncos. I'd sign Sam Walker and recalibrate your cap. I mean, the Melbourne Storm and Penrith seem to be able to have their superstars in the spine, and I think Brisbane should just have a lash at him and just ask the question because Sam Walker has another 10, 12 years in front of him.
Another question. Would Pete agree that Billy Walters should be replaced by Blake Mozer? The team seems to play better when Mozer is on the pitch.
Another great question. Look, guys, I think they've got the chemistry right. Look, I've got to say, I've liked what I've seen from Blake Mozer. He's shown some nice creative touches when he's come on. However, there's another side to the game that's defence, and he came up with 2 really poor misses against the Dolphins, and he got steamrolled the other night. So I think defensively, Blake has some maturing to do, physically as well. But I like him in a 14 role at the moment, and I certainly think Billy should start next year, but I would be keeping an eye on Moser because I think over the next 12 to 18 months, if his development goes as they expect on the development curve, then the plan will be that he overtakes Billy Walters, who is 30 and getting older. So I think by 2026, Blake Moser should be starting for the Broncos.
Just on the other Brisbane teams, Pete, you might be on your Mad Monday after this weekend if the Dolphins can't get a win. It'll be very quiet up there in Brisbane. Any news on the Dolphins heading into this must-win game against the Knights?
Yeah, huge game, boys. Look, I think Wayne Bennett's obviously the master of these situations. Pretty stable team for the Dolphins. And I know, actually, one thing with Tom Flegler, we've spoken about him before, he's having nerve transfer surgery to try and save his career. So a bit of Dolphins news there. He'll go under the knife on Wednesday. So he won't play in Sunday's game, but he could be out for another 6 to 12 months. Would be a massive blow for the Dolphins for next season. Yeah, huge blow, but they're hopeful that he will play again. But right now, for Sunday's game, Tavita Pangai Jr.'s had some hamstring issues, but he's determined to play, and they need him on deck because they need some muscle up front against this Knights team that's charging towards the finals.
Now, Pete, obviously heard a little story about your Kentucky tour back in the day, and a few questions have come through about that. You told the story of the reasons behind you going on that Kentucky tour, and Murray's asked the question, did you use that story to gain attention on the occasional lonely evening under a European moon? And another one, how did you fare on the Kentucky tour? Croft wants to know.
Well, this is a family program.
No, it's not.
Even though James promotes certain products.
Hopefully he didn't. Hopefully he didn't need certain products.
I'll send you some freebies, Pete.
Yeah, I need it, Magus. I'll say two things, guys. One, I have a good head for radio. And two, my strike rate was worse than Adam Gilchrist. Put it that way.
Hey, Pete, if hypothetically, if the Queensland teams are sort of wrapped up by week one of the finals and you were to have a Mad Monday up there in Brisbane, what would that look like for you?
Well, I'm a very boring man, Magus. Maybe it might be a tear at the new Beatson Hotel, that the NRL-owned Beatson Hotel.
Oh.
What do you reckon?
Any freebies?
The Caco's yesterday's pub.
Where's the Beatson? Where's that?
So that's formerly Gambaro's.
Oh, okay, just over the road.
Right near Suncorp Stadium. And they've called it the Beatson Hotel, so that could be where all the millennials end up going.
That's outstanding. Well done to whoever's come up with that name. That's a cracking tilt of the hat to the great man.
Hey, Pete, thanks for joining us. I'm starting a public agenda to get you front and centre on more of our stations down here in Sydney as well as up there in Queensland.
I'm thinking maybe ambassador for Kentucky tours maybe next year could be more your go, Pete.
I reckon I might get him a gig with Pilot as well.
Nah, he doesn't need it.
Well, boys, I am 47 years old, so the Kentucky tours have long passed me, but I'll take the other. I'll hit up Maggers on the other stuff.
Love your work, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, boys.
See you, Pete.
There he is.